was reading a book this week, and the guy was saying how people would tell him how he was tired all the time, and his response would be like, "You should be worried if I don't look tired because you're starting a company." So I thought it was a good response. So there you go. You should be worried
Okay.
if I don't look tired.
Okay. Good. That's good to hear. I'm glad you're working hard.
Pretending to, at least.
So yeah, how are you finding the book endeavor?
Admittedly, the mortgage paying career has been consuming most of my time the last couple of weeks. So I haven't had any time to deal with it or to like push it along. I've been waiting as well. Naomi's been doing a bit of an edit for me, and she's found a few typos. So I sort of waited for her to like go through it and edit it, and then I could just do like one last typo change, and then hopefully have a final version of the book. So once I do that, then I think um, I can sort of think it's final almost. But it's nice, like the Irwins have been trying to sell a few copies here and there to their friends, which is kind of cute. So
It's cool.
which is nice of them. So they've had actually a couple of people ask for a copy, which is cool. And then yeah, it's just trying to bring it up in conversation with people here and there. And I think it just let it start slow and see if it builds some traction. Like, yeah, I think next year is the year that I want to push it. So just get it in a place this year that I'm ready to push it, and then take it next year.
Good on you. It's exciting.
Yeah.
I guess in line with that, trying some of the e-commerce stuff, and with the way finances are going at the moment after COVID, and our topic today will be around inflation. Do you feel like the consumerism that we were talking about earlier and how that drives things like inflation, do you think that'll influence things like your book sale?
I think I've probably passed the benefit of COVID consumerism, if you'd sort of call it that, for the book. So I think people are going to be very particular with how they spend their money in the next couple of years. So I think that'll be, but whether that has a mass effect on the book or not, time will tell. But I guess if it's got merit, it's only $20. I suppose it's not the end of the world. But yeah, it's a changing world with this whole with inflation and things like that. And I guess I wanted to bring it up today just because I thought it was a relevant topic, and I thought could talk about a few different perspectives on it that I think people aren't talking about. Because I work in the world of finance, and this is sort of what I deal with every week and every day. And and yeah, I think it's more and more relevant. Everyone's kind of hearing about it. Interest rates going up. People have more pressures on their income, and everyone's kind of seen. Most people have missed this inflation surprise, so to speak. And I think there's a few factors that people like. There's sort of a lot of the narrative around it. Inflation has been, typical things like the war in the Ukraine and supply chain issues and others, like these really high level narratives that everyone's been talking about for a long time. And the government's been giving away money, and I think all these things contribute, but also I think there's other things in the last couple of years that have been overlooked that might be interesting to talk about. And one of those is this sort of COVID consumerism. So I think when we all sort of got into lockdown and COVID hit the last sort of 3 years or so, firstly, everyone stopped spending as much money on transport and going out and other, other things that would drive their income. And at the same time, they had less financial pressures, interest rates dropped and things like that. So the people started buying crap all the time. So I think, you sort of, the delivery guy was at everyone's store every day, Amazon Prime, you took off. And I think what's interesting as well, like if you think back to the pandemic, during the pandemic, Apple, which is probably arguably the largest consumerism company in the world, so to speak, right? Like they want you to buy their shit all the time and churn it over every 12 months when the next Apple fucking 27 comes out, right? Like
with no new features.
A
new plug that you'll need to buy a new adapter for.
That's gonna
surprise
$100.
Oh, and we don't include the plug anymore. You have to buy that separately. Oh, no headphones either.
And the charger is new, and the adapter, and also you need a new screen cover and a new case, and everything else, right?
Yeah, that's right. Oh, to replace the screen? Oh yeah,
Yeah,
$600.
$600. Like
Yeah.
fuck
Oh,
you.
uh-huh.
But what was like, the whole world goes into lockdown. Things effectively stop. But Apple, during the pandemic, became the world's first $1 trillion company and the world's first $2 trillion company within the space of 12 months. So
Really?
yeah, yeah. So I think if the pandemic hit in, let's say, March of 20, by October, I think, of 20, it was worth $1 trillion. And then I think by sort of March of 21, it was worth $2 trillion as a company, just because they made so much fucking money during the pandemic, right?
Wow.
Because everyone was buying shit all the time.
Yeah.
Amazon did very similar, like not quite the same, but I think they breached the $1 trillion barrier as well. And again, massive consumerism company, and I think like it's just so irrational, right? Like, how could we all, how could the world stop in inverted commas, and yet we have these landmark events in company growth that happen, that you have $1 trillion of value in inverted commas created within 6-12 months. It's just
Mm,
it doesn't make I think there was some irrational nature to that, but also there was clearly some fundamental, they're making more money because we're spending more fucking money. So I think
mm.
like the consumerism mindset from COVID was just was something that I think that a lot of us overlooked as an impact on inflation.
I think yeah, that's a very good point. I never even thought about that. I think during COVID for me, it was being incredibly extroverted and needing and wanting people around. Um, it really did leave a gap in your
Yeah,
like being. Like you felt very empty, and I can see now that you're talking about it, that connection with getting something new and using something new, and products like Apple that are designed to connect people more or less,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
doing so in a level of prestige, right? Um,
Well,
it would give people that feeling of I'm a part of something that's important, part of something that's bigger, and I could yeah totally see how that would be a byproduct of such a difficult time. People looking for happiness somewhere else.
and I just think that that level of demand from a consumerism standpoint has just pushed the prices up across the board of assets and sort of impacted inflation. And I think that sort of that wealth that was created from us buying all this shit, like people made a ton of money, right? Like, how do you double your money in the world's biggest company in 6 months' time? It's insane. But people
Mm,
made, I'm sure, heaps of money and cashed in on a lot of that money from that consumerism.
mm,
And I think it certainly, to your point, like, pushed us towards digital interaction and pushed us towards digital connection. But again, like, why are we using these devices? Well, typically it's, because we're looking at some piece of clothing or some piece of jewelry or some new cute thing that I want to buy or get or look at. Or like, think about how many fucking like the fitness clothing lines that have come out in
yeah.
the last 3 or 4, LSKD, and that's the only one I can think of right now. But there's so many of like those. This is like what's the other one I'm thinking of?
I think of Under Armour, but that's been around for a
Yeah, no, but like
while.
those ones, but like the smaller brand names, like, but there's always some fitness chick promoting some fitness brand thing on Instagram, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
check out this latest gear I've got from LSKD or whatever else. Like, there's a few of them are going around. But again, like, so we just perpetuated this buying of crap during during
Yeah.
during COVID, and we just created these assets, be it through a company or through a share price or whatever it was, that were just hyperinflated in their value because we had so much money to spend on crap during COVID, that now it's kind of like showing its head. It's like, well, okay, everyone spent all this money, all these prices have gone up because we didn't have enough supply at the time. There was all this demand, and
Mm,
now everyone's like, oh, well, inflation is entrenched. And it's like, oh shit, I got to pay more for a pair of tights, whatever it is.
mm.
And now it's kind of reeling back. Um,
Do you think
but
that's
yeah,
different? Do you think that's different? Because there's always a degree of consumerism that exists, right? So clearly, COVID's done something,
yeah,
and we can see that in how these companies have responded with their profits.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's I often think to myself, like, we went through the 2008 GFC, and thankfully we were like like just scraping in being adults, and watching the fear that was around that. I guess because we weren't so heavily impacted, it seemed to just kind of coast on by. And I wonder if this kind of situation that we're in now, if it's a similar kind of setup. Are we going to? Is this going to be something that's going to resolve over the coming year, and normality will kick in 18
Mm,
months'
mm.
time? And as much as I felt like that happened in 2008, I'm not sure if it did, because I wasn't as affected as I am this time, and the same for you. But maybe one of the thoughts I have with the inflation thing is, I guess we all feel a bit broke because of how expensive everything feels,
Yeah,
and like any suffering, once you're in it, you're going, shit, is this forever? Like,
yeah.
I got to do something here. And it makes you, a bit worried. What do you think about the bounce back from this? So obviously we're going to get the repercussions of increased or devalued dollar, and we can't get as much. Do you think that the process is that this will stay the same and we'll eventually see 16% interest rates over the next 5 years? Or is this going to be something that will level out again to normality? And what is even normality?
I think it's this is a bit of a almost a if you take it to the end of the thought train, I think it's almost a a reckoning of the need that things can't always be good. We've had this perpetuation of governments responding to situations in the terms of we will fix it with by doing X or we'll fix it by doing Y. Post the GFC, interest rates came down, interest rates stayed very low for a long time. Governments, during COVID, all these governments around the world handing out money to people. It's okay, we'll get through it. Like, here you go, here's some help, here's some help. Oh, look, we're still growing. We're not in a recession. We're still growing. Because every prime minister or president's
Mm,
trying to show that they're doing a good
yeah.
job. And now, because of that, all these companies, blew up and the stock markets got super inflated in their prices, and assets really, housing market, exploded around the
Mm,
world. And I think it's almost a philosophical reckoning where it's like, well, can we actually be okay with things going backwards for a few years? Because we can't just keep kicking the can down the road thinking that we can constantly grow all the time, because that's just not how economies work. That's just not how the world works. It's not, we talk about it a lot. We talk about the need to suffer, or, shit happens, right? And we
mm,
we have this hyper sensitive culture to negative economic, broad negative news, like, where if bad things are happening, we think people need to be helped all the time, and shit just happens, right? House prices go down. Like, things don't always go up. And I
mm,
think this is what this is. It's like this, it's almost as if, well, shit, we've kind of kicked the can down the road for long enough. We have to kind of almost deal with the fact that the world is, we made some mistakes in how we valued assets and how we try to always show growth all the time. It's a bit of a, I don't think we'll get to 16 percent interest rates, but do I think that Apple's going to get to $2 trillion again anytime soon? Like, no, I think we're going to be several years from really sustained growth again in financial assets. Just
mm,
because we sort of had this hyper growth for 5-10 years that became the normal sort of, oh, I just expect to get 10-15% on my assets, and I expect to be able to buy a house, and I expect to be able to negative gear it and make double the house price in 10 years. Like, it's just like, well, that's not just not sustainable to like constantly do that, right?
mm.
It has to stop at some stage.
So I mean, I feel as though, and like, I'm not a socialist, but I feel as though that's the inevitability of capitalism.
That we want it to always grow.
I think any process that's built on constant growth will, inevitably run out of resources.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair comment. I think, but I think that's part of the issue as well. Is, you know, how do you account for the fact that you will run out of resources? Like, we just
Mm,
kind of, or you will run out of the ability to fund your financial positions, or you will have assets that break, or things that get devalued. Like, yeah, I think you're right. This is like a capitalism sort of conundrum, where it's like, well, we always want to make money in a capitalistic society. It's like, well, yeah, we can, and we have for a long time, but it's just not how the world works anymore.
yeah, not today.
Not
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
I think part of it as well, in a traditional capitalistic society, this is sort of, it's a very, I guess, labor market driven or tangible asset driven society. We build shit. We create things physically. There's a tangibility to what we're doing with our lives. Think about the growth that happened in the United States in the 50s, 60s, 70s, even in,
Mm,
into the 2000s. It's very driven around, physical, tangible assets, right? That's really what, the Industrial Revolution is really kind of, think about a couple hundred years ago, really what's setting up these democratic capitalistic economies to become the behemoths that they have come, be it the US or even Australia, right? Very much a mining driven economy, very much a resources driven economy. This is how we've made our money for a long time. And you think in the last, probably in the last 10 years, you've gone from a world where the most profitable and valuable companies in the world, you know, for the last 100 years, have been companies that produce tangible assets,
mm,
that produce cars, or that produce, are a mining company, and then you kind of shifted to financial sector in the sort of 80s and 90s, where you had a little bit less tangible, but they were still services driven company, a bank, for example, a Goldman Sachs, or, these kind of banks are, they've been around for a long time, but they became, certainly more of the big companies in the world. The last 10, 15 years, you've gone, shifted again to these almost intangible asset companies, the Googles of the world, the Facebooks of the world. You think of other, Microsoft is a bit more tangible in how they provide a service, but these very large companies that, are almost, they're just marketing companies
mm,
fundamentally, right? Like
yeah.
but all of the value we've put into these technology companies, right? That we think are the solutions to all our problems. Um, we think the next big tech company is going to be the next, the next big thing in our world that's going to change our world in some way. Apple is the exception in the fact they give you a tangible asset, but a lot of these companies don't give you anything tangible, right? And I think that's, it's a sort of a fundamental shift in where we place value in assets in our
Mm,
economy. And I think, and taking that a step forward to the nth degree is these sort of fake assets, if in my opinion, is cryptocurrency and NFTs, right? Where you have value placed in something that is completely non-tangible, right? Typically, like, economies have been built on people buying resources and food and cars and homes, things that actually help your life. Holding a piece of Bitcoin on a screen doesn't do anything in and of itself. Holding an NFT on a screen has no practical value in your life
mm-hmm,
outside of driving your ability to create more value in tangible areas of your life. So you don't,
mm,
so the point being, you don't hold uh, a Google share, or you don't hold a piece of Bitcoin, or you don't buy NFT for the sole reason of doing that. You do that so you can go ahead and see that asset increase, transact on that asset, so you then can buy a bigger fucking house.
yeah.
That's why you have those things, not because I like the asset in and of itself. I use that. And again, what is it? What fundamental value is it driving in the world? It's, well, nothing. Like,
Mm,
if you compare it to a traditional asset, and I think this is, again, is another reason why inflation has kicked in, is we've created these things that we pretend have innate value. We pretend that Bitcoin is of some value in and of itself, like a piece of gold or silver, but it isn't. It is a piece, it's an asset you hold so you can transact and put into a currency that will give you a car or a house or some more food. And I
Mm,
think, again, it's this shift. It's this such a dramatic shift in the last 10, 15 years around what assets as a society we value. And then when you actually get back to physical assets that you got to pay for every day, and energy and food and clothing and cars, oh shit, everything's more expensive because we've invented these other things
mm,
to make the real shit more expensive.
mm. It's a really good point. I think I agree with you. Shares in general have always just perplexed me because I'm thinking to myself, it's just a perceived value of a company. There's no actual outcome here. So it's a popular thing. It's like
Yeah,
it's just the society's deemed that, yeah, this seems pretty cool. And they roll with it.
100%. I mean, I don't know if you heard the stories back early this year around this sort of group trading that happened on some particular stocks in the US. So one of the stocks was GameStop,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
was,
yeah.
yeah, if you've heard this story,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
and again, all these people got onto Reddit and everyone traded GameStop at the same time, set the asset price through the roof. Again, people make fucking money doing that. People make
Mm,
tons and tons of money trading that stock within a few days.
mm,
And again, on what fundamental value? Nothing. There's no
nothing.
fundamental change in the company that's occurred in 2, 3 days. They haven't produced a new good or service for the consumer to perpetuate their capitalistic society forward. I think back to the whole concept of capitalism, it is built on tangible assets. It's not built on these fake pieces of these fake assets that we assign value to.
Mm. I mean, we could think of the China situation at the moment with their what do you call it? The building companies or the
Yeah,
construction companies selling assets to people that aren't even there yet, and
yeah,
people buying them and paying them off, and like that's a real tangible approach to the same thing. Though I hear when I hear this from us, I feel like it's almost a testament to society's success because when you talk about like a hierarchy of needs, we're meeting all these other needs to a degree of which we need to invent some ether where things are meant to exist that we really have no idea how it drives value because all our other needs are met. So it's almost as though it's a testament to how successful society is because the house is there, the car is there,
yeah.
the food is there. And so
It's
now we're looking for other means to find value in money.
maybe I don't know if success is the right term, but maybe it's a testament to how capitalistic we have become almost, right? In the sense that like how how spoiled we are that we can create an asset in an image on a screen, right?
Mm,
Like, to your point, how far have we taken it? How satiated are we in our car and our food and our clothing that we now must find satiation in perceived value and interaction on a non-physical reality. Like, I mean, the whole metaverse thing as well. Again, I think that's so far been a bit of a flop, but I'm not close to it at all. I sort of stand very far away. But again, like trying to create value I don't care how long you spend in the metaverse, you still need to take a piss. You're still going to eat some
mm.
food. Like, like you still got to go and use physical infrastructure to survive. Like you got to go and get out of the house maybe. But
But people are drones, man. Like not everybody, but like so many people are willing to just roll with it without consideration. And things like the metaverse allow people to escape
yeah,
from the difficulties that we're talking about right now. And I see I see that as the next level, not necessarily a level I want to jump into, but like I was working with people at the restaurant I was working at for a while, and a lot of the guys in the back are pretty young, like less younger than 20 or 20 or so. And I'd talk to them about what they're doing with their time, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I just whack on the VR and I hang out in there with people." I'm like, "What? Like, what do you mean? Like all day? It's to just sit there on VR all day." And
wow,
like, I don't know about you, I've used the VR like twice, right? Like,
never
and
no never used it.
it's pretty cool,
It's
but it's
good.
also like very disconnecting.
Yeah, yeah.
Josh was telling me the other day, who has a VR, that he's pretty bored and he's using it, and he goes, "It's kind of sad, like." You're in there, you're talking to people, but that it's not actually them or whatever. It's
Yeah.
a very weird way. It almost makes you feel more separated. But it's these sort of things, as much as they seem ridiculous, I also feel like it's inevitable. Like the Ready Player One thing, like that's such a you've seen that, right?
I have actually watched the
Oh
movie.
my God.
It's a good.
I'm gonna come over and watch it with you. It is the one of you will love it. It is
Oh,
one of the
really?
top tier movies, and the book is even better because it goes into more detail, but it covers all the shit that you're talking about around it's not as real world. Like you got to take a piss, you got to do this kind of stuff. Well, it
Yeah,
seems
yeah.
to cover all the bases and makes it feel really plausible, and then the direction that we're going almost exciting. Um, because the world isn't easy for everyone. The world is really hard for
Oh,
the majority of us. If we are in the top 1 or 2%,
100%.
and
Yeah, yeah.
we're enabled to have these thinkings.
Uh,
So, like, even though these things are getting created and it seems really against what it means to be human, what it means to have a shared experience, it seems to be going in the way that most people would rather play the game of escapism and play the game of this is fake, just like the NFTs,
yeah.
than deal with the reality of being fed or like owning your own home.
I totally agree. The part of the point I try and make with Glowface is is this whole idea around we sometimes there's this narrative that we get, when will artificial intelligence rise up and kind of take over our humanity and enslave us and have whips and chains and do.
Hooray!
Yeah, yeah.
I can't wait. I'm
But
fighting
like,
for the AI overlords, man.
I think there's I probably don't subscribe to that theory personally, but I think on the other side it's, what are you actually afraid of losing?
Mm,
What freedom do you think you will lose that you don't currently have? The
mm.
freedom to and I think fundamentally, what is freedom? Well, the freedom is to you choose to use your time and attention how you want to. Well, fuck that. Your time and attention's whatever
Yes,
whatever your social media tells you it's going to be,
yes,
right?
yes,
So
exactly.
so I would argue that it's just got a concept around humanity, like technology is sort of already abusing humanity's weaknesses, our tendency towards wanting
Well said.
dopamine and our tendency
Mm,
to want, towards wanting some level of pride and influence on social media. But I think, what happens when, artificial intelligence or technology overcomes humanity's strengths. Well, I think, fuck, it's already doing that. Like it's
mm,
already overcoming the things that make us most human, our ability to actually think and engage with each other, our ability to, form a social group and have a leader that takes us forward as a society, our ability to learn and educate each other, our ability to use our talents and create things in this world. And that's sort of the kind of the narrative I take with Glowface. But I think to your point, this sort of non-real world that we are creating, is having a almost it's like a bit of a reckoning moment that, like, hey, maybe we can't really do this sort of fake bullshit thing online and create fake assets and things like that, because it has a real impact on the things that actually make us human and keep us alive.
mm,
And I think maybe there's this sort of economic reckoning where it's like, well, hey, Bitcoin's cute, but we actually do need to be able to transact on goods and services in a
mm,
real intangible way, um, rather than creating some fake, fake value from an alternative reality, be it the metaverse or a non-real asset.
Let me challenge that a little bit. If I think of any asset and the value that's applied to it, and hypothetically, the price mark that you put on your book, I mean, inherently, that price is an ambiguous thought in a game where you are just trying to compare or be relative in a market. I mean, if anything, isn't that then the same, where the drive of the people's perspective of value for that thing deems its worth? So, I mean, if we look at it like that, and we said the nth degree a few times, where is value in anything? Isn't it just perceived? And if anything, then what we're looking at doing here and what you're describing as the real value is in experience, is in human experience. And if that's the case, then I think this is true then. Um, the quality of the house that we have isn't that important. The degree of the nicest car we have isn't that important.
Yeah.
It's being able to meet a need. And so if Bitcoin is excessive because it doesn't actually have any tangible value, then you would argue that anything that doesn't meet basic survival needs is inherently overvalued, unnecessary, and in the same boat.
I'd agree with the value is as a perception thing. You think of gold, right, which is probably the first currency.
Yeah.
Used to people trade and exchange gold and silver and diamonds and things like that. That was the currency, for a long, long, long time. But we just invented that, right? Fundamentally, you either ship a piece of rock or gold, right? It's. I mean, it is a scarcity sort of thing as well. But to agree, there's a perception in that we create that if we adorn ourselves with gold, then we are of a higher status. And so, you could translate that to today. If I have more Bitcoin or more followers or whatever it is, I am of a higher social status. It sort of translates through, right? But fundamentally, does either asset actually drive any fundamental human need? Well, I think yes and no. Like, yes, in that we have a fundamental human need to feel important, I think, or or there is a weakness inside of us to feel that we are of value to our fellow people. So I would agree that the value. I would agree in saying that these non-tangible assets are driving some, are fulfilling some fundamental human need, I guess in a similar way that perhaps, let's say, food or transport or infrastructure would. But whether that is I guess maybe not human need, I think it's exploiting a weakness rather than actually fulfilling a need. And
What's
I think
the need? What's the weakness you think it's exploiting?
I think it's exploiting how, I think, pride fundamentally.
I think it's like a social acceptance. Like we're talking about value being driven by a popular demand. And if everybody thinks that this is cool, like Pokemon cards and whatever else, then suddenly it becomes valuable because we're accepted by the society that we're in.
Yeah, I agree. So I think acceptance. If we're all talking about Bitcoin, if we're all hanging out on Metaverse, or we're all why did you play computer games for a long time? It's not because you like computer games, because your friend played the computer game and gave you a reason to socialize and create you have a connection. So I agree. I think there's some level of perceived connection, but also I think there's some level of it gives us an opportunity to feel important. Why do you post something on social media? To get attention. Well, attention feels good. What does having 100 Bitcoins mean? Well, it means that you are wealthy. Well, wealthy means, gives me a sense of pride that I have financial well-being. So again, I think it's, why do I have the best NFTs? It gives me attention. So I think there's that sense of, it's exploiting our desire to be. I don't want to say. I will say it. Like I'll say, I think be better than other people. We feel better than other people if I have lots of likes, I have more followers, if I have more Bitcoin or more assets. I mean, it translates the same whether it's a gold or a crown and jewelry that 2,000 years ago or today it's Bitcoin. I think it's the same thing.
Exactly.
But I think we have taken that very, very far. Whereas you think about gold actually has a finite scarcity to it, right? Bitcoin to an extent, but people's attention as well on social media to an extent. But there's certainly more a greater proliferation of these other assets that allow us to feel these things.
Yeah, there is. And so, I mean, coming it back around to inflation, then I guess so. It's almost like we brought this upon ourselves because of our desperate need to feel like feel included, or feel a part of something bigger, or
Totally. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah, and our desperate need to never have things go backwards.
yeah, which is such a case, isn't it? I mean, when they do go backwards, the pressure it puts on yourself, and I guess it is then obviously as well comes back to the societal pressure, because like in essence, like your stocks going down or your mortgage going up, just like thankfully for us, like we're still okay. Like the fundamental needs are met, and it's still like it just feels like you fucked up, like you've made a mistake, like
Mm.
you're not doing well, even though these assets aren't really necessarily directly um, helping you to survive or live a good life. Because I mean, I love the idea that happiness is a choice. So the amount of money really shouldn't affect your happiness too much, particularly at a point, right? Like, what's this? What's the stat? I think if you're owning over 80K, that your happiness doesn't really change.
Oh, there's it's a bell curve, right?
Yeah,
Like there's a
a
there's
bell
a
curve.
no, yeah,
It
there
just
was
kind of like it just
no,
curves
there's a
off.
there's a peak of like happiness to income, right?
Yeah.
So where like your income goes up and your happiness tends to go up with it, but there's a point where it starts to drop, where your income increases but your happiness drops because your life gets more complicated, or you have more people wanting money
Ah,
from you, or so there's I've seen
I
it in the
didn't know
books
it. I
before.
didn't know. I didn't know it decreased. Fuck.
Well, I don't think it's probably a
Makes sense.
generalization, but like yeah,
Makes sense. You
maybe
get more shit. You gotta do it. Like I hate having shit. Like I did. I had. I was probably the most wealthy in my early 20s, just contextually, and I had so much shit. And like trying to. I remember moving out of the unit I was in, and this garage, which is like 1.5 car garage, was packed with stuff. Not shit. Not like blankets and stuff. I mean like brand new canoe, a compound bow, like everything, every which way was in this thing, and it took me days to clear that thing out. Days and days, like on the amount of shit. And that from that point on, this is 6 years ago now. I've
yeah,
been gradually getting rid of that shit. Only in the last couple months have I'm like, okay, I only have some plates left from that experience. Now I have, like back then I had so much just stuff to get rid of. And it does make you feel miserable because it's like, I'm not using it. I should use it. I need to maintain it. Got to look after
yeah,
it.
I'm gonna take care of it. Oh, I should clean
Like,
it. I should, yeah, yeah,
oh, yeah, exactly. You feel oh, yeah. And like, oh, it's just crazy the amount of stuff. Like, when was the last time you dusted the top of those shelves back there?
yeah. No,
Like shit. It just seems to be better to have less. But still, I tell you, not have with the inflation and with these consequences of the markets and such, losing the safety that you feel you get from that perceived safety, right, is
mm.
still very impactful on that bell curve. It's taking those steps backwards,
Yeah, sure.
and you still feel like stressed. And
Yeah, no,
sorry,
I was gonna say, like, yeah, I think you do. It's a envy at times the part of the population that probably doesn't, well, that doesn't give a shit about inflation right now.
yeah,
There's a big bunch of people with, oh, okay, I didn't even know it
whatever,
was happening. Whatever, I just
yeah.
keep having my money. All right, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, they don't have investments and such. They're just working and spending money and just
Yeah,
rocking and rolling,
yeah,
which
okay.
which is great for now. Then till it comes into a few years time, or 10, 20 years
But
time.
even like the ultra wealthy, right? Who don't give a shit. Oh, okay, cool. Inflation's at 10%. I still have $50 million. I
Yeah,
don't need to, it
which
doesn't
will
make.
also correlate to increased interest
Yeah,
rates,
I'll get more
and I'll
money in
get more
my
money anyway.
deposit
So
anyway. So
bada bing, bada boom. So
yeah,
when
um,
really that's the yeah, it is it does make me nervous. It does make me nervous. Yeah, it does make me nervous. Like my loans and other things. And then what makes me nervous not is as much around the inflation itself, but feeling trapped because I'm trying to invest in a future when I'm so trying as well to be present today.
mm,
And whilst investing in that future, working in positions like for work, for money, that I'm not exactly in line with my nature or the things I really want in my life. But now
mm,
I'm doing them because shit, I have to do them so I can
mm,
finance my investments so that I can do the things that are in line with my life. And
mm.
it feels very uncomfortable.
Yeah, limiting. I think
Limiting.
in your options. Yeah, so trapped is probably the most dramatic way to say it. But like,
Yeah.
yeah, there is a yeah. No, you as you accumulate more responsibilities, the flexibility to pick things is you have an obligation to pay your mortgage. That's at the end of the day. Like
Mm.
that's every month that will happen. I've got a big ass fucking mortgage. I got $1 million mortgage.
Yeah.
It's not going away anytime soon. Like
No.
I've got to deal with that one day. Like I got to pay it off. That's it, really.
Yep.
Like,
That's it.
it's not going away. Like,
Nope. Nope.
um, the last thing I thought was a contributor to inflation, and probably a little relevant for us is I guess relevance probably makes it sound mean, but like fake jobs or like non-real jobs. And I
Yeah.
say that in a like you think about, you and I have both worked jobs where we didn't work jobs, where we got paid for a 40-hour week and we did not work a 40-hour week. I think of my startup job. I think of the job I worked at Westpac.
Yeah, the
You
banks,
know,
man. The
the
banks are the
banks, man.
worst, dude.
Fuck, like I see it now in like, yeah, my job. Do I think my job is a real job? Like, yes, sort of. Like, do I feel busy? Yeah. Well, what does that mean? Like, um, it doesn't mean I have a lot of emails. Again, I'm not doing anything tangible, or everything I'm doing is just on a fucking screen. But there are certainly people in banks and huge conglomerate businesses that have jobs that aren't real.
Mm,
That have no fucking point.
mm.
You're just there because
You're making
someone
reports, and
someone invented it,
then nobody
right?
does anything at the end of the
Yeah, yeah,
reports, and you do
yeah.
another report, and it goes on and on. You're just
And like
monitoring something with no outcomes.
like pretending that there's value in what these people are contributing to these businesses, and what the head of sustainability, and or the head of I think Dad's got some fucking thing in his business called the head of inclusion and diversity. It's like,
Ah,
Jesus, like, you're a head of, he'd been making like 200K to be like the head of inclusion and diversity in HR.
that sounds pretty
Like,
sweet.
yeah, like what do you actually do?
Oh
Like,
yeah, they make
yeah,
sure everybody feels like
it's
they're
included,
included.
and everyone needs to
Hello,
be
David. Do you
diverse.
feel like you're included?
Yeah.
Yes. Great.
What's your KPI? Ever 80% of people included.
Yeah.
Um, and I just think, like, again, if 50 years ago you worked a job, and
Mm,
your daily output was very tangible, right? You got the fruit and veg from A to B. You built the car, you built the house, whatever the fuck it was, right? And even now in our banking jobs, like, everything, like, I don't do anything tangible. Everything's on the fucking internet. But like, the ability for these, in our non-tangible society, for these non-real jobs to appear, people to get paid these non-real jobs. But fundamentally, what are they contributing to a capitalistic society from their personal output? Nothing. Fuck all. They
mm.
are more. They are more, taking in the demand side of the equation and supplying nothing to society. They work their 9 to 5. They go home and they watch TV. They buy their shit on Amazon and they do it 5 days a week. And they buy the
Uh,
Apple's fucking iPhone the next time it comes out. And I just think, yeah, again, it's this kind of magic creation of these jobs that, there's so many people in these jobs right now, guarantee it.
oh yeah.
And they're all just more money in the system to make things cost more, to make things more expensive.
Facebook let off like drop
11,000 people.
11,000 people. That's how
11,000 fucking people
11,000
all.
people are not necessary to
Yeah.
make Facebook run. That is a
Yeah,
shit ton of
it's
people,
a
man.
huge amount
It's
of people,
crazy.
right?
And
Totally, right?
I think, like, if you realize something too, you might not have, maybe you did do this intentionally or didn't, but like, we're talking about creating something. And I really believe that the only way to add value in the world is to bring something new into it.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think that, like, your book is the ideology of doing just that. Like, you've gone ahead and created something brand new out of nothing, and you've gone ahead and put it out in the world. Like, that's real value. Bringing a new invention, a new idea,
Yeah.
and
Thank you.
sending that out there is where it is. So it's like, I don't know if you, maybe when you started it, I'm interested because, like, is that, or was that your motivation? Like, I want to do something real.
Interesting. No, not really. Admittedly, I mean, the motivation is more the sort of philosophical side of the book, I think, than the tangibility of it. But yeah, it does. It has become a marker. Is that the right word? Like, you know, like a physical, tangible reference point. Like, oh, like this wouldn't be here if I didn't do it. It's like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. And there's some new thoughts in there
Mm,
that are there that wouldn't be there had I not had those thoughts or tried to, you know, create those thoughts. And I totally agree with how you assess value, just how you phrase it. Then is you know, have you brought something new to the equation? And there's so little of that.
yeah.
There's so
There's
little
no
of it.
room to do it. There's no advice on how there's society's concepts around where we end up and how we end up working are very linear, and often creativity isn't available to everybody. Only the best get
Mm.
it. And whilst these like mediocre kind of jobs that exist, there are so many, and so many people can do it. So it's not encouraged in society to do this. You go through school with very linear subjects. Some you have to do, and
Yeah,
then you
yeah,
get
yeah.
sent to uni with courses that are as like straightforward as law. Like when you finish this, you'll be a lawyer. Okay, cool. There's no creativity in that. There's no
No.
creativity in our learning with very clearly defined criteria. So yeah, I think it's that comes into the capitalism, isn't it? Like in a weird way, it's almost counterproductive.
I mean, we do reward, like as a capitalistic society, we do reward people with really original ideas. Again, Apple, like, okay, there's actually a lot of there's merit in the assets they produce. You know, Steve Jobs is a very original, you know, thinker, putting the iPod together, the iPhone. Like these are all things that have changed people's lives, and you know, we've rewarded it. Like Netflix, for example, like okay, there's a way that's changed our lives, and it's, you know, I hate using the word, but you know, disrupted media and things like that. Like it's a stupid fucking word, um, but yeah, we really do value original thought, and I think we
Mm.
reward it, and rightly so,
But if it's
as we
safe to
should.
do it, I think we
Yeah,
said it
yeah,
before around what we're trying to do is create safety and inclusion, and being part of a society has that safety, and having the roof over your head and being able to meet that mortgage is really good. But taking the time to be creative, to create Apple, like Steve Jobs would have had a rough gig in the first however
yeah.
long it
And
took.
yeah, and I think to your point before as well, like the new wave of inflation that we are in now, this world that things cost a lot of money, and your responsibilities compound with the fact that the world's cost everything costs more money. It's like, well,
Mm,
I can't have as much creativity. I can't quit my job and try and sell a book for a year because I've because the world is the way it is, and
mm,
it's partly my fault, but it's partly the society. So to that conversation, it will be interesting to see whether or not in the next 5-10 years that the level of creativity will it be stifled by the fact that there isn't that much ability for people to take financial risks, because the world is very different to what it was been like for the last 10 years,
mm,
where interest rates were at nothing, and you could make a life and pay your rent and your mortgage without too much risk, versus now it's like, well, hey, fuck, rent's going up, interest rates going up, you can't take that bigger risk to do the
mm.
startup or have the original idea.
And
And
your social exposure is huge. Like there is no escaping the fact that everybody that you know will tell somebody, like the
yeah,
Facebooks and everything else online that allows instant knowledge from everyone else's activities. There is no way to hide not just your success or your attempt to be successful, but your failures in doing so.
yeah,
And that is a terrifying concept when it comes to the social judgment that exists when we have parents and the last generation looking for security and safety in means that no longer are applicable to our happiness.
I think it's an interesting place maybe to stop for today's on failure, because I think
Mm,
we can pick that up. I think that's a good something we think about a bit like last few weeks. We can pick that up next week around yeah, and maybe inflation is giving us less room for a failure, but then the world as well is giving us less appetite for it as well. But I think
mm.
it's an interesting conversation that maybe we can pick up next week.
It sounds good, Dave. Yeah. Thanks for today. This was
All right,
good.
man. Thank you very much.
I'll speak to you then.
Speak to you then.